It is the official start of the 2024 race, which means it is also the official start of Trump said X news cycle. One of the things that he said was definitely headline worthy. The other one was twisted and turned into a little bit. We put those two together so we can react. Let's take a listen.
If I had prisons that were teeming with MS-13 and all sorts of people that they've got to take care of for the next 50 years, right? Young people, they're in jail for years, and if you call them people, I don't know if you call them people. In some cases, they're not people, in my opinion, but I'm not allowed to say that because the radical left says that's a terrible thing to say. They say you have to vote against him because did you hear what he said about humanity? I've seen the humanity, and these are bad, these are animals, okay? And we have to stop it. We can't have another Lakin. We have so many people. We have so many people being hurt so badly and being killed. They're sending their prisoners to see us. And they're bringing them right to the border, and they're dropping them off, and we're allowing them to come in. And these are tougher than anybody we've got in the country. These are hardened criminals. Mexico has taken, over a period of 30 years, 34% of the automobile manufacturing business in our country. Think of it, went to Mexico. China now is building a couple of massive plants where they're going to build the cars in Mexico and they think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States with no tax at the border. Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. Now, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it.
All right, so Krystal, those were the two controversial things that Trump said. One of them he's actually said before. I remember when he said it whenever he was president. The other about the bloodbath comment, though, this is how some of our media outlets covered it. Let's go and put these up there on the screen. Here's the major takeaways. At least CNN, ironically, did end up writing it correctly. They say Trump warns of a bloodbath for the auto industry and the country if he loses the election. That's actually accurate. Politico, though, Trump says country faces bloodbath if Biden wins in November. New York Times, Trump says some migrants are not people and then predicts a bloodbath if he loses. NBC News, Trump says there will be a bloodbath if he loses the election. Bloodbath now being seized upon, even though it was clear, if you watch it, it's obviously in the context of the U.S. auto industry. Even the New York Times, only half of their headline correct. And, Ryan McGrim made a point on whenever he was following this. Trump, prior to going on stage, had talked about how he wants all of his people to snap to attention the way that they do in North Korea with Kim Jong-un. And Ryan was like, guys, he says enough actually crazy shit that you don't need to invent news cycles about the things that he said to go after him. But they were so desperate, for the bloodbath comment.
That's how I feel about it as well. Right. I mean, if you listen to the whole context, he throws in that thing at the end of and that'd be the least of it, which kind of muddles the comments and gives them a little bit of something to stand on of see, he's talking about the country as a whole. But obviously, if you're an ordinary person, you're reading those headlines, you hear Trump, says it's going to be a bloodbath. If he loses, you're thinking about January 6th, you're thinking about political violence. You're not assuming that he was, building up to this with this whole long rant about the auto industry and China taking our jobs, et cetera. So I do think that's very misleading. And, we played the comments that he just said about immigrants, which are horrifying and disgusting on their own. So when you mess around with the other comments that he made and you intentionally muddle the meaning of them, it gives you less credibility to talk about the things that he says that, in my opinion, really should be out of bounds, and just to address that directly. And I do think that watching what's unfolding in Gaza has made me perhaps more sensitive to this type of directly dehumanizing language than perhaps I would be otherwise, because we can see in real time what the potential atrocities and results and horrors that unfold when you routinely dehumanize a group of people. But, it's fine, as we do, to have an argument about what the appropriate immigration policy should be and what that should look like. You shouldn't have to lie to do that, which he is lying when he talks about, they're emptying their prisons and paints the entire migrant population as a bunch of criminals and lunatics. overwhelming majority of people who are coming here, they're fleeing violence, they're coming for economic reasons. Again, you can debate how many of those individuals have legitimate asylum claims and how many should be let in and what we should do. But you shouldn't have to rely on lies to make the case. And also, you shouldn't have to rely on stoking false fears of this existential threat of, this overwhelming wave of criminal migrants in order to make your case either. And so I do think that that is disgusting. I think it's condemnable, and I think it's dangerous.
I think it's fair for you to say that. Look, and I'm not going to defend what he said, but I will at least make the political point. What Trump's genius is always is he says the most outrageous thing, and he gets people to say, no, actually, some criminals are human, whatever, And then now you're actually talking within the frame of migrant criminality and or the murder, as you said, of Lake and Riley, which is what he was trying to raise. I agree with you. I personally would like it if people debated things the way that we do here, and we can talk about it in a respectful manner. But that's not how politics works, right? Everything is about seizing upon the most outrageous and extreme example and using that in order to cast your enemy. So, personally, what I do think at least is, again, I'm not defending it, but I can only analyze in the politics of this, is that if you have a media outrage cycle of people being like, hey, Trump says migrants are not people are going to be like, well, hold on a second. If you watch the clip, we're talking here about people who are MS-13 gang members. Now, you can go and you can analyze the number of people who actually do commit crime or whatever. But, in general, people do feel a certain different way about people who are here illegally committing crime versus legal citizens, because people who are illegally shouldn't have been here in the first place. And in general, I think I would say probably to his political benefit, given the way that people feel about the immigration crisis, regardless of whether you think he's telling the truth or not.
Go ahead. That's why he does it. It's obvious
that's right.
That's why he does it. I'm not talking about the political benefit or optics or whether it's good for him or bad for him. I'm talking about the morality of it. And, I do think it's absolutely condemnable. He catches you in a trap because on the one hand, if you ignore the things that he is saying, right, then that sort of rhetoric and, really disgusting, dehumanizing rhetoric becomes normalized and almost accepted. If you cover it, and you talk about it and you say this is condemnable and we should in fact condemn it and this should, listen, you have your First Amendment speech rights, but as decent moral people, we shouldn't be in the business of dehumanizing immigrants. We shouldn't be in the business, as he's also done, of dehumanizing leftists as vermin. We shouldn't be talking about immigrants using Nazi language, which he doubled down again when that Howard Kurtz interview that we played part of, saying, yes, they're poisoning the blood of the country, that we shouldn't be doing that. Then you are sort of playing on his turf because now, what are we talking about? We're talking about immigration. And that's the issue where he's strong and where Biden's approval ratings are the lowest. So he does politically catch you in a trap, which, yeah, you're right. That's exactly why he does it. But you also can't ignore the fact that he has some, really hardline immigration restrictionists in his circle. And that some of the policies that he implemented last time around, some of which, by the way, Biden continued, but he is at least positioning himself to be even more hardline this time. So it is legitimate to talk about the way the rhetoric informs the actual policy decisions as well. But you're right, Saagar. It is definitely a well-laid political trap. And that's precisely why he does it. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I remember watching it because there was some meeting. I think it was something about MS-13. This is the first time he ever did the animals comment. It was in front of Nancy Pelosi. It sparked this whole thing. And I just remember man, they go for it every time in terms of how it generally works out for him. On this one, we will see. By the way, it's possible that's why the Biden administration decided to seize not necessarily on the migrant comment, but on the quote-unquote bloodbath thing to try and turn it into a thing. Here is a perfect example of how the media ran with it. We have Jen Psaki, the former press secretary, on her new MSNBC show with the Biden campaign's communications director, both of them trying to turn the bloodbath thing into a conversation around political violence, which is definitely ground where they have benefited in the past. Here's what they had to say.
What I heard was a continuation of the same rhetoric, the same endorsement of political violence that we've seen from Donald Trump for years, as you pointed out. It goes even farther back, right? This is the same guy who, after Nazis marched on Charlottesville and killed a woman, said there were very fine people on both sides. Is the same guy who, in 2020, told the Proud Boys, a white supremacist group, to stand back and stand by. And now every single day on the stump, he is championing and praising the insurrectionists who he encouraged to violently storm the Capitol in an attempt to overthrow our democracy. So it's not simply one comment. This is exactly who Donald Trump is, and this is exactly the threat that he poses to our democracy every single day. I think the problem for Trump, though, is that the American people saw what happened on January 6th, and they've responded consistently since, right? They responded in 2022 when Democrats had the most successful midterm cycle for a Democratic incumbent since FDR. They continued to respond last year in states like Kentucky, Ohio, and Virginia in the fall elections then, and they're continuing to respond right now. That's why we're on our front foot heading into this general election, because the American people fundamentally understand, A, what Joe Biden has done to fight on behalf of the American people over the course of the last 3 years, but they see every single day now the threat that Donald Trump poses if he's able to regain power. He is talking every single day about tearing down the fabric of our democracy and enacting political revenge if he's able to serve on a dictator on day one, as he is promising to do.
So that was Michael Tyler. He's the communications director, very much trying to turn the bloodbath thing into a major story. So any final thoughts here, Krystal, in terms of the media handling and all this?
Well, just to reiterate, I mean, Trump does talk all the time about how he's going to, pardon the people that were there on January 6th who were convicted of crimes or whatever. Like, you don't have to invent a context that didn't exist for the bloodbath comments in order to make the case that he's making there. And
I think you're right.
it undercuts your credibility in the long run.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.